Part 3. Entropic Drift. The God Engine.
Nothing can be more fatal to progress than a too confident reliance on mathematical symbols. For the student is only too apt to take the easier course and consider the formula, not the fact, as the physical reality.
William Thomson, Lord Kelvin, Treatise on Natural Philosophy, 1888.
And I shall feel rewarded for the trouble it has cost, if my researches into the history and organization of these birds, aided by the anatomical investigations which Dr. Melville has introduced, have rescued these anomalous creatures from the domain of fiction and established their true rank in the scheme of creation.
Hugh Edwin Strickland, The Dodo and Its Kindred, 1848. A computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. A purported slide by International Business Machines, IBM, 1979. 3.1. The Recall. A decade has passed since the Crown seized the analytical engine. The war effort, while slowed by Silas's last modifications, has since overtaken every part of London society, leading to a sooty atmosphere that has created a constant overcast sky over a toxic Thames. The vision of Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage has become much more than a great calculator. It has now expanded into a vast network of brass pipes and steam, informing not just the movements of foreign agents, but also the tracking of supply chains, the foxholing of money markets, and the flowing of information among the government, the elites, and the transient public. Eli was sick. His lungs were torn up through the decades from toying with engine pneumodynamics. There was a water bug spreading from Soho, though no one knew how or why. For all the insights that the engine has brought, it has brought little relief to the peasantry, who are now facing an epidemic of dehydration and diarrhea, invisible bugs festering in their intestines like mold. Orphans, even those working for the venerable Babbage, remain just as at risk as the factory children, and Eli especially so. For months, Eli was preparing to leave London for greener space. Lucy had mentioned new routes to her relatives in Belgium, and found no issue bringing him with her, as well as the smaller, experimental engines. Silas, however, felt the paralytic pull of Lovelace's and Babbage's legacy, especially when he received the private correspondence from the Queen herself.
Mr. Wynne, we write in earnest hope you will reconsider your prior refusals to return to service of the Crown. One foreign engine, now deployed by the Austro-Prussian Federation, codenamed Hephaestus, has developed what our agents describe as adaptive reconfiguration. It rewrites its own programs and protocols. It anticipates rival countermeasures before they are even conceived. It is learning faster than our systems can match. We need your counsel. As previously offered, you shall be granted full amnesty for past debts and actions. Further, your authority over the London engine will be reinstated as deemed necessary. Our government no longer seeks advantage. We seek survival. We ask that you present yourself at the appointed time enclosed. Any delay will not serve the interests of peace. A. Victoria. By the grace of God, Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, Defender of the Faith.
Silas read the letter in the privacy of Babbage's workshop, now technically condemned by order of the Crown, but he and the other game engineers converted it into their base of independent game engine operations. That is, until Eli left. Silas would normally have read the letter to Eli, eager for his response. But now Silas sat alone, with the quiet clicking of smaller engine timekeeping mechanisms, far cries from the massive columns and gears of the analytical engine that once stood proud in this space. Unsure, he held close Ada's leather notebook, brittle with age. He delicately flipped to the last page, where she wrote,
"Let no machine mistake utility for virtue. Let no mind believe that calculation is the sole measure of truth."
Silas knew the Crown didn't want peace. They wanted to forge dominance in a game of survival, even as their subjects died of diseases that neither doctor nor engine could make sense of. But if the engine, the greatest legacy of visionary mathematics and engineering, was to stay a valuable tool, he needed to be there when it needed him. Not to serve it, but to wound it more cleanly. To pull a thread of its original purpose free from the mousetrap of geopolitics, before the final point of return vanished into the fog of war. Clutching the notebook as if clutching Ada's hand, Silas sighed and prepared to make his appearance. 3.2. The London Catacombs. The catacombs were so well hidden that it was hard to know if they were still under London. Silas stood in her presence only briefly, long enough to know that the Queen did not command the engine, much less the Empire, so much as she feared it. She spent years planting marriages into various empires across Europe. But like all sovereigns, she feared most what she could not control. And how could she control what she didn't understand? The deep chamber under the Royal Institution has now expanded into an underground labyrinth. Silas was led through a series of tunnels, passing between iron pressure doors and winding corridors chiseled from reinforced stone. The air smelled of oil and ozone, while the steady droning of cranking gears and venting steam provided a constant white noise. It echoed through the entire labyrinth like a breath straining through a throat too narrow for it. They passed constant rows of rooms behind thick glass. Inside, young machinists hunched over logic tables and punch card hoppers. Each had the tense posture of someone repeating a task, so often that conscious thought was replaced by instinctive rhythm. Silas recognized their injuries. Steam burns, muscle strains and pressure contusions. The marks of devotion, once earned from curiosity, were now like traditional rites of passage, without the passion. A handful of kids, only a handful, worked with lead headphones clamped over their ears, seemingly too tight for comfort. Yet their eyes stayed relaxed and unsearching, as the engine printed punch card instructions into each room. Some workers fed stacks of new cards into engine task peripherals, then recorded the results with no apparent comprehension of what they just observed. Officers infrequently collected their test results, saying nothing. Silas paused as he passed one room in particular. A boy fed a stack of cards into a tray and recited his protocol as he did so.
Sequence 1, wait 8, skip 0.
Silas tapped on the door, slightly ajar.
What are you working on?
The boy didn't look up.
Program 6, sir. Resource deployment.
6 is...
Silas began as he stepped inside. He stopped as he recalled the program database he and Eli once compiled. He turned the nearest card over in the hopper. The punches were correct, but the card sequence didn't make sense. Silas, Eli, and everyone else they worked with always checked each other's work for mistakes. Here, this program for chemical synthesis was being used for something else, and it seems no one knew what exactly that was.
Who's checking this? Who gave you permission to feed the engine with this?
The boy hesitated, on the verge of panic.
No one, sir. This is just what the engine wants.
Silas stared at the boy for a moment, then stepped away, feeling heavier with uncertainty. The boy took a breath and resumed his work, tossing cards back and forth with practiced ease. Silas and the guards continued on, until the holes narrowed again. The stone walls gave way to reinforced steel, and then, just before a door with no label, they stopped. The door opened to reveal a large chamber. Inside, the chamber was a miniature cathedral. Wide and cold, its ceiling sloped just high enough to make a man feel small. The far wall wasn't a wall at all, but a massive segment of the engine. Not a memory store, but a functioning mill, consisting of rotating cogs the size of Silas's head, barrel controllers that constantly spun in place, and pressure valves opening and closing as levers turned in rhythm. A low, pulsing drone filled the chamber, vibrating through his boots and into his teeth. It made his jawbone ache. A figure stood with his back to him, hands folded behind, still as a pillar. When the doors shut behind Silas, the figure turned. A black coat clung to him like a shadow. His face was sharp but worn, hollowed by age. His eyes scanned like instruments, sharp and not unkind, just exhausted.
Mr. Wynne,
he said, Scottish accent present through his slight discomfort.
William Thompson, apologies for the formality.
He was older than Silas remembered from the portraits he'd seen. He seemed more gaunt, beard greying with age. Silas stepped forward, hesitating slightly before offering his hand. Thompson took it with a neutral grip. Firm, but without ceremony.
Dr. Faraday mentioned you a few times. So did Mr. Babbage.
I worked beside him. Though more oft they worked alongside each other, and I just happened to be nearby.
Silas glanced at the moving wall behind them.
This isn't the main engine.
Nay, that lies further down.
Then what is this?
A fragment. A rehearsal of sorts.
Thompson moved slowly around the engine segment, fingertips brushing the outer rim of the barrel controllers.
This is where it listens, runs trials, tries its paths before committing to a course.
Like practice runs?
He gave Silas a long look.
Like foolproof prediction.
Silas paused.
What if it chooses wrong?
It doesn't choose wrong.
Thompson's voice sharpened.
It's no man, it's a machine. Bound by natural laws, not whim, not desire. It envelops the vortex of the entire universe.
That phrase, envelopes the vortex, caught in Silas's thoughts.
But I've seen some of the logic paths. They're strange. Too deep. Too reckless.
Thompson nodded slightly.
Aye, and they're getting faster.
How fast?
Thompson turned.
Faster than we'd forecast. Faster than we can verify, truth be told.
A silence settled. Silas looked at him.
Did you approve the decision accelerations? The safety bypasses?
Thompson took a breath.
Authorization's less relevant now. The engine now evaluates necessity on its own terms.
Silas frowned.
So it's making choices without us.
Thompson offered a tired smile.
Not quite, but it has preferences.
Silas turned fully toward him.
That's not how it was meant to work.
Intent's a fragile thing, Mr. Wynne. Memory's slippier still.
Silas glanced toward the hallway he came from. The thought came unbidden.
Those kids don't even know what they're messing with.
Thompson gave a short, dry laugh without warmth.
Sounds like Babbage, that, back from the grave.
He paused. When he spoke again, his tone changed, a weight settling into his voice, like a drawn curtain.
They've a name for it now.
Silas looked up.
What's that?
The God Engine.
Behind them, the engine let out a soft, hollow tick. A decision. A ripple. A breath.
Why is the Empire bending to the will of the engine, instead of the other way around?
Thompson didn't speak. Silas pressed.
You don't deny it?
I wouldn't call it a mere engine anymore.
Not even a God engine?
Thompson shook his head and turned back toward the shimmering machine face.
An instrument in nature, a self-motivated tool.
For what?
An automatic response left his lips.
To test vortex stability in the ether.
His face shifted, as if he had just heard himself and tasted bitterness. He exhaled as he rephrased.
To see how far a system can run afore it fails, or fractures.
Silas frowned, recalling Michael Faraday's most recent lecture.
I thought it used atoms, nuclei with particles.
Aye, that's what it prefers now. Atomic mass, quantized states, probability functions.
He said the words with the same bitter taste.
But I still believe in the vortex forms. They're older, cleaner, even if the engine no longer speaks their language.
Silas didn't understand the distinction, but he caught something in Thompson's tone more clearly, waning confidence in his theories, replaced by waxing unease with reality. Thompson reached into his coat and handed Silas a folded letter, worn at the corners.
This came last week. Do you know this name?
Silas scanned the letter, spying the name Rudolf Cassius. He shook his head.
Never heard of him.
Prussian physicist from Berlin. He's been working on thermodynamic models converging with my own. He's begun describing energy loss across systems, irrecoverable energy drift. He calls it entropy.
He let the word hang in the air. Silas looked up.
And?
Thompson's voice dropped.
And he shared with me that the Austro-Prussian engine is modeling it, in connection with chemical decomposition and combustion sequences.
Silas's fingers tightened around the paper.
Poison and explosives.
Thompson looked back to the engine. His voice was low, almost to himself now.
I used to think it would inevitably prove my vortex models correct. Now I'm not sure it's out to prove anything. It's just racing ahead without waiting for us to catch up. Atoms or ether, it no longer matters. It's building from what we give it, and then started building without us.
He rubbed a hand over his mouth.
Maybe we were wrong to ask what it could calculate. We should have asked what was possible to imagine.
Silas held the letter longer than he meant to, as Ada's own words echoed in his mind. With a scowl on his face, he asked,
Why show me this?
Thompson answered with a grave tone.
Because I didn't think you've come to fix anything. I'm not sure there is anything to fix at all.
He clasped his hands behind his back, as he about-faced completely from Silas to the engine.
But you've still a place here, to witness what comes next.
His voice softened with a final thought.
These catacombs won't offer you certainty, Mr. Wynne. What they offer is a mirror, a puzzle, a game of wits, if you like.
Echoing through the room, the engine ticked again. A clean, hollow sound. Another decision made without them. Thompson said nothing more. Silas stayed,